You'll want to take out your notebooks to take some notes because today we're going to be talking about operations with matrices. Now when I say operations, I mean add, subtract, multiply. We're not going to be dividing matrices today. And I'm writing these notes on March 23rd of 2020. Now the first thing you need to know is what a matrix is. So a matrix really is just an array of numbers. So let's say, for example, I give you a matrix that looks like this. Maybe we have 2 and 3 and 7 here, and -1, 5, and -8 right here. So here's an example of a matrix, and it's just an array of numbers, and really it's a way of organizing our numbers. In this array, we have what we call rows. So this right here is row 1, and we have row 2, and I could potentially have others, but in this case I only have 2 rows. We also have columns, so here is my first column, so we're going to say this is column 1, and then right here we have column 2, and this last column would be called column 3. Now the first thing you need to be able to do with a matrix is determine the size of the matrix, and when we write down the size of the matrix, we call it row by column. So first we'll write down how many rows there are, and then we'll write down how many columns. So for this example matrix we're looking at right here, notice there are 2 rows and 3 columns. So we would say that this is a 2 by 3 matrix. Now we often use capital letters to talk about matrices. So for example, I could say that this right here is matrix A. But really you can use any capital letter you want to represent your matrix. Now the first thing we're going to be doing with our matrices is adding and subtracting them. So we're going to say, for example, that I give you this matrix right here. Okay, so let's say we have -1, 2, 0, and 1 for our first matrix. And we are going to add a second matrix, which is 1, 3, -1, and 2. Now, the first thing you need to know is that you can only add matrices if they are the same size. Okay, so I'm going to just put this little star over here, that you can only add matrices that are the same size. So notice that on this particular problem we're looking at, my first matrix has 1, 2 rows and 1, 2 columns. So this is a 2 by 2 matrix. My second matrix also has 1, 2 rows and 1, 2 columns. So both of these are 2 by 2 matrices, which means that I can add them together. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, now when I add matrices together, I actually only add each piece. So for example, here I have my row 1, column 1, which is a -1. And here I have my row 1, column 1, which is a +1. So I'm just going to add those together in my row 1, column 1, here in my answer matrix. Okay, then we move on to our row 2, column 2. So I have here my row 2, column 2 is the number 2, plus row 2, column 2 here is a 3. So I'm going to be adding those two together. Okay, then I look at row 2, column 1, where I have a 0, plus row 2, column 2 is a -1. And last but not least, I have row 2, column 2, which is 1, plus row 2, column 2, which is 2. So now all I have to do is add these numbers together. So I can see that if I add this first piece, -1 plus 1 is 0. My next piece, I have 2 plus 3, which is 5. 0 plus -1 is -1. And 1 plus 2 is 3. And here is my answer matrix. Now that's how we add matrices together. Subtraction will actually work the exact same way. So let's go ahead and do a subtraction problem. So here's our example 2. Okay, let's say that I give you this problem right here. We have 1, -3, and -2. And this time we're going to subtract the matrix -1, 3, +2. Now again, please notice that these matrices are the same size, which means that we can add them together. Each of these has 1, 2, 3 rows and 1 column. So each of these is a 3 by 1 matrix. Since they are the same size, I can go ahead and add them, so let's do that. So for my first number, I have 1 minus -1. My next number, I have -3 minus 3. And my last number I have is -2 minus 2. Please notice how when I subtracted that negative here for my first number, I did double up on that negative sign. So now, if I subtract these, I get 1 minus -1 is the same as 1 plus 1, which is 2. -3 minus 3 is -6. And -2 minus 2 is -4. And here is my answer matrix. So that's how you add and subtract matrices. In just a moment, we're going to go on and talk about multiplying matrices.